Mr. Darvas, thank you for being with us. Before asking anything on the Greek program, I would like to focus a bit on some issues of great importance for the EU finance and the future of the European Union. You have recently pointed out that the income inequality seems a challenge, given the fact that we are on our way to elections for the Netherlands, France, Germany, perhaps Italy. How can this affect the political developments? Are you afraid that this can be a destabilizing factor?
It's a very broad and very difficult question, because if you look at income inequality in Europe, in European countries or in the European Union as a whole, it's typically much lower than in the United States and much lower than in Africa, Latin America or Asia. Clearly in Europe, thanks to the very large welfare states that we have, the distribution of income is much more equal than in other parts of the world. Now, having said that, there are also differences within Europe. For example, in Southern Europe like Greece and Italy, inequality is typically much higher than in Nordic countries like Finland and Sweden. Certainly in more unequal countries, people can be unhappy and may be more ready to vote for more extreme parties. But I would say that, while Southern Europe has an inequality problem, the most important problem, social problem in Europe, in my view, is still high unemployment in a number of Southern European countries like Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy, but also in France, unemployment is very high. Because, people are unemployed and they are seeking jobs, they perceive that, extremely disappointed. And, when someone is disappointed, then certainly that someone is more ready to vote for extreme. Now, coming to your question, how these inequality, or as I would say more the unemployment problem, may influence elections in Europe. There will be two big elections this year in Germany and France. In Germany, unemployment is very low, extremely low, so I don't think that it can be a big issue. Also, inequality in Germany has increased recently, but not very high. In France, it's a more bigger issue because unemployment in France is well above the German value. It's coming down very slowly, and certainly that can lead to dissatisfaction and perhaps additional votes for the National Front. So just to summarize, in Germany, I'm less fearful that inequality and unemployment and other social problems may have any decisive impact on the vote. On France, the chance is a little bit higher, but I think that, the current popularity of the National Front already reflects the current level of dissatisfaction or unemployment. And if in the coming, not much till the elections, but if in the coming months unemployment will improve the support of the more centrist parties instead of the National Front.
On the other hand, asking by the rich countries to share the risk or even increase equality percentage, this has to be connected with some kind of sovereignty risk. Do you think that European citizens are ready to adopt some sovereignty risk?
I would hope yes, but my answer is unfortunately no. So what I do see is a very strong perception in richer and stronger countries that the problems of Southern Europe are homemade, partly because these countries was badly managed. Politicians did unsatisfactory policies before the crisis, and they didn't do sufficient adjustment during the crisis, like implementing structural reforms and doing fast enough fiscal consolidation. So I think from the side of the many stronger countries, and perhaps most of the stronger countries, including Germany, there is a very negative perception against any pan-European initiative which would involve more burden sharing. So for this reason, even though, as I said, I think Europe would function much better if there would be more pan-European facilities, forced adjustment, share the burden, in particular social problems. Unfortunately, I see very little political reality for such initiatives to getting support. For example, also the Slovakian presidency of the EU very strongly pressed for this EU-wide unemployment insurance scheme, which I believe would have a rationale. It wouldn't solve all problems, but it would be, I think, an important step. Yet, again, I see very little prospect such a European unemployment insurance scheme could be agreed on.
Coming to Greece, I understand why politicians are generally reluctant to proceed in structural reforms. There is a political cost, of course. In Greece, some reforms have been made. A lot of them are pending. After 7 years of crisis, do you think that this is the only reason that Greece hasn't recovered? I mean, Cyprus or Ireland have. Countries which were much poorer, like Slovakia, show outstanding performance. Why Greece is a case study by itself?
I would say two major reasons why the Greek crisis became so deep that, 25% of GDP was lost and more than 20% of employment was lost. The first one is the financial assistance program in 2010 was, the first one, to a lesser extent the second one too, but especially the first one, was based on unrealistic assumptions. So the assumption was that, first of all, the public debt is sustainable. There is no need for any debt restructuring. Greece will just have to do a fiscal adjustment, and after sufficient fiscal adjustment and structural reforms will be implemented, the country will return to growth, and then future will be bright. I mean, the first program expected that already I think that the cumulative GDP loss will be only about 8%. Already, I think in 2012 or 13, there will be economic growth coming and job creation coming. Now, this was clearly a major failure in the assumptions because Greek public debt was not sustainable, and certainly the output loss became much larger than expected. This also meant that Greece always had to do more and more fiscal adjustment, because the fiscal the financing of the program, set the volumes of financing, the money that IMF and European partners lent to Greece in nominal terms in euros. So it meant that the budget deficit couldn't be higher than what financing was available. But because GDP was always weaker and weaker, tax revenues was always weaker than it was planned in the program. So in order to meet the budget deficit target, Greece always had to do more and more fiscal adjustment. So I think these unrealistic assumptions and this extremely harsh fiscal adjustment, I think, was one reason. And the second big reason, I would say, is a lot of talks about Greece leaving the Eurozone. Starting in late 2010, throughout 2011, practically every day, all media, had an article whether Greece will leave the euro today or tomorrow or 2 days from now. And certainly when there are such expectations or there is such probability that, a country may leave the eurozone, which would be really dramatic for Greece, then, nobody wants to invest. Nobody wants to keep their money in Greek bank accounts, which led, to a large fall in bank deposits in Greek banks. Nobody wants to invest. Everybody is selling their properties, houses, stocks, whatever they have. So clearly, there's a lot of talk about debt restructuring and a lot of talk about the need for debt restructuring, which, official creditors didn't agree. But for this reason, everybody talked about whether Greece will leave the euro. So this talks about euro exit. Clearly, the very negative impact on the Greek economy.